Hey, Mr. Donacade. Now I know. Okay. Well, it's very interesting. I do not find myself releasing any of my feelings about there being an important distinction here. And I think we're sorting through the language enough to finally discuss the distinction. And your challenges are competent and apt, so it is helping me identify where where I would make this distinction. What is the distinction about? So one thing I notice is that you can interpret an event as natural or artificial by the definition we've been using. And let me give the definition. So basically, for the purposes of this, maybe we need a new word for this sense of natural. We could call, but basically what we're discussing here is the idea of the natural world as uninfluenced by the will of man versus the subset of the natural world which is influenced by the will of man. But even that doesn't really get to it because of your lion example. We see the distinction. And so let's say we just look at it this way. We take any situation, any problem, any test as something that we can interpret either way, as natural, artificial, right? And anything we go through can be interpreted both ways. I mean, for example, the birth of a child. There's intentionality there, the will of man, and finding somebody. And yet we could call that natural because the will of man is not really involved in the mechanics of that. That evolved naturally without the will of man playing a direct role. And yet the will of man always plays some role in anything we talk about because we're mankind, and so obviously by the time we describe nature that's uninvolved with us, we've seen it, observed, and interacted, at least in that minimal way, and affected it, a la the kinds of principles you have in the uncertainty principle and stuff, where if you to observe something is to interact with it, which is to affect it at least a little bit. So I think some part of this is this interpretation. I mean, to use the slave example again, if a slave master is saying do this, and you'll pass the test. If you don't, you've failed the test. Well, you can look at that situation and say, well, the natural test is the one where I'm judged by whether I survive and succeed. So the artificial test, he's going to just judge who won. And so I think I can reword, the assertion I'm trying to describe about this distinction in that all tests must be naturally decided on the ramifications by your survival. That's the real test. The criteria of the test that you're given, say, by a powerful human being, where they tell you what the criteria for success is, that's invalid. I don't recognize that. It's always the natural test, and whether you can survive by the rules of nature, so to speak. So I think I have more to say, but I am circling around some meaning here, so I don't want to put too much into it. So we'll just see if that makes any sense to you, and if we're going to take it anywhere from here. Cheers.